What up, y'all? Your boy blew up on here. Man, I'm having trouble sleeping. I can't sleep. So I'm gonna make a cup of coffee and stay up. So I'll be right back. I'm gonna go make that cup of coffee. What up, one viewer?
and they sat down to an endless feast. They ate the flesh of a boar named slseep, who was cooked and consumed each night, and magically restored each morning. They drank mead that flowed from the udders of a goat named Hydra, who fed on the leaves of the tree. It was not paradise. It was boot camp. The warriors were training. They were preparing for Ragnarok, the final battle at the end of all things, when they would march through those 540 doors and fight alongside the gods against the forces of chaos. And they would lose. The Norse knew they would lose. Ragnarok was not a possibility. It was a certainty. The gods would die. The heroes would die. The world would burn. And from the ashes, perhaps, something new would begin. But Valhalla was not the only destination. Those who did not die in battle went to hell. And hell, in Norse mythology, was not punishment. It was simply the default. Hell was presided over by a goddess also named Hel, described as half alive and half dead, with one side of her body living flesh, and the other side a rotting corpse. Her realm was cold, dim, and joyless, but it was not torture. It was existence without glory, without purpose, without the honor of a warrior's death. The Norse afterlife was unique among world mythologies because it was organized not around morality, but around the manner of death. It did not matter whether you were kind or cruel, honest or deceitful. What mattered was how you died. A warrior who fell in battle went to Valhalla. A farmer who died of old age in his bed went to hell. The same person, depending on their final moment, could end up in either place. Viking funeral practices reflected this worldview. Ship burials placed the dead in vessels stocked with weapons, food, animals, and sometimes sacrificed servants, provisions, and the battle to come. Cremation released the spirit from the body. The flesh they were transportation. Now travel south, cross the Alps, follow the Mediterranean coastline to the world of ancient Greece, where death was imagined very differently. The Greek underworld was not a battlefield, it was a bureaucracy. When a Greek died, the soul descended beneath the earth to the realm of Hades, a god so feared that the Greeks rarely spoke his name. The border between the living and the dead was a river, the Styx, and to cross it you needed a ferryman. His name was Carol. He was old, he was grim, and he required payment. A coin, an oil, was placed in the mouth or on the eyes of the dead before burial. Without the coin, you could not cross. You would wander the near shore of the Styx for eternity, unable to enter the underworld and unable to return to the living. Once across, the soul was judged. 3 judges, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, evaluated the life of the dead and assigned them to one of 3 destinations. Elysium, the Elysian fields, was paradise. Reserved for heroes, the virtuous, and those favored by the gods, Elysium was the land of eternity. Gentle breezes and effortless joy. It was rare, few qualified. The Asphodel Meadows were the default destination, the Greek equivalent of hell. This was where ordinary souls went, people who were neither great nor terrible. The Asphodel Meadows were gray, quiet, and endlessly monotonous. Not suffering, not joy, just existence. A faded echo of life. And Tartarus was the pit, reserved for the truly wicked.
What up to viewers?
Offended the gods. Tartarus was a place of eternal punishment. Sisyphus pushed his boulder up the hill forever, watching it roll.
One viewer.
Each time he neared the summit. Tantalus stood in a pool of water beneath branches heavy with fruit, but the water receded when he bent to drink, and the fruit eternal denial. Unlike the Norse system, the Greek afterlife was morally structured. Your destination was determined by how you lived, not how you died. But, like the Norse system, it was permanent. There was no redemption in Hades, no second chance. Death was a one-way door. The Greeks embedded death into the cycle of nature through their myths. Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, was abducted by Hades and taken to the underworld. Demeter's grief caused the earth to become barren. A compromise was reached. Persephone would spend part of the year in the underworld and part on the surface. When she descended, winter came. When she returned, spring, death, and renewal, descent and return. The oldest story in the world. Orpheus, the greatest musician who ever lived, descended into the underworld to retrieve his dead wife, Eurydice. His music charmed Hades and Persephone, and they agreed to release her on one condition. Orpheus must walk ahead and not look back until they reached the surface. He almost made it. At the last moment, overcome by doubt, he turned and
Leave the 100% Rocky Mountain water for a refreshing taste. Quarter banquet.
Okay, Martine, time to do it. How much do you think claiming a good deduction would save you?
I know, how much?
Do you want to ask a trusted expert?
Customers find an average of $6,000 in tax savings.
When you're 100% confident in your books, you can 100% focus on doing your business.
Please and tips. Here. Prevent the quick with Tip Meds from Chewy Pharmacy.
just the facts from Just for Men. Fact. Dye your hair the wrong color, and people will notice. Just for Men shampoo in color offers 15 shades. Get compliments, not questions.
Music, adventure, entertainment. Sounds like a hit. Join the membership.
Eurydice was pulled back into the darkness forever. The myth of Orpheus is a story about the impossibility of reversing death, about the human desire and about the theories of death. These two traditions, the Norse and the Greek, are among the most well-documented afterlife mythologies in the Western world, but they are far from the only one. In ancient Mesopotamia, the dead descended to Kura, a dark, dusty underworld where all folk, regardless of virtue, lived as shadowy versions of themselves, eating clay and drinking dirty water. In Hindu tradition, the god of death, Yama, guides the soul to Yamaloka for judgment, and the soul is reborn according to the karma accumulated in life. In Chinese tradition, the dead pass through Diyu, a multi-layered underworld where they are judged and punished for specific sins before being reincarnated. In Aztec tradition, the dead traveled to Mecca, the deepest level of the underworld, navigating 9 challenging layers over 4 years before reaching their final rest. In indigenous Australian traditions, the spirit returns to the dream, the eternal creative dimension that underlies and generates physical reality. And across all of these traditions, despite the vast differences in culture, geography, language, and era, certain patterns recur with eerie consistency. A journey or crossing, a river, a bridge, a tunnel, a passage from one realm to another. Guides, Anubis in Egypt, Hermes in Greece, the Valkyries in Scandinavia, Yama in Hindu tradition. Beings whose role is to escort the dead to their destination. The technical term is psychopomp, a guide of souls. Moral judgment or evaluation, the weighing of the heart, the life review, the 3 judges of Hades, the karmic accounting, multiple possible destinations, paradise or annihilation, Elysium or Tartarus, Valhalla or hell, heaven or dissolution, and the importance of proper death rites performed by the living, coins for carol, offerings for the camp, prayers read aloud in the bardo, funeral pyres for the Norse. These patterns predate contact between cultures. The Aztecs never met the Egyptians. The Aboriginal Australians never met the Greeks. The Norse never met the Hindus. They all arrived at the same basic architecture for the afterlife. A guide, a journey, a destination. Why? There are 2 possible explanations. The first is neurological. If the dying brain generates a consistent set of experiences, as the gamma wave studies and near-death research suggest, and symbolic language. The tunnel is universal because the optic nerve misfires the same way in every human brain. The life review is universal because the hippocampus activates the same way in every dying cortex. The beings of light are universal because gamma surges in the temporoparietal occipital junction produce the same hallucinations, regardless of whether you worship Osiris or Odin. The second explanation is that they are all describing something real, something that exists beyond culture, beyond biology, beyond the physical structure of the brain. Something that every human civilization has glimpsed at the threshold of death and tried to capture in myth and ritual, sacred architecture. We cannot yet determine which explanation is correct, but the pattern is there, and it does not stop with the ancient world. The three largest religions on earth today, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, collectively followed by over 4 billion people, have their own answers to the question of what happens after death. And their answers share more with the ancient traditions than most believers realize. Chapter 9, the Abrahamic answer. Roughly 4 billion people alive today follow one of 3 religions that trace their origins to the patriarch Abraham, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Between them, they account for more than half the population of the earth, and all 3 have placed death at the very center of their theology. Christianity is the largest religion on the planet, with approximately 2.4 billion.
What up, whoever's watching?
And its entire theological structure revolves around a single event, a death, and what came after it. The central claim of Christianity is that Jesus of Nazareth, crucified by the Roman authorities in approximately 33 of the Common Era, rose from the dead 3 days later. This resurrection is not treated as a metaphor or a spiritual teaching. In mainstream Christian doctrine, it is a historical event. The body that was placed in the tomb walked out of it. And this event, Christians believe, changed the nature of death forever. Because of the resurrection, Christianity teaches that death is not the end for anyone. At the second coming of Christ, all the dead will be raised, not just their soul, their bodies. This is the doctrine of bodily resurrection, and it distinguishes Christianity from many other afterlife traditions. The promise is not just spiritual survival, it is physical restoration, a new body, a glorified body, a body freed from disease, decay, and death. Upon resurrection, the dead face.
Yeah, I'm just chilling, wide awake, can't sleep,
The unrighteous are separated from God permanently.
having insomnia.
The precise nature of this separation varies enormously across Christian traditions. Some interpret it as literal fire and eternal torment. Others interpret it as the absence of God's presence, a spiritual condition rather than a physical punishment. The
What up,
Catholic
Rob?
tradition includes purgatory, a temporary state of purification, where souls that are destined for heaven are cleansed of remaining sin. Protestant traditions generally reject purgatory, holding that salvation is determined at the moment of death. The Western imagination of heaven and the other place has been profoundly shaped by a poet. In 1320, the Italian poet Dante Alighieri completed the Divine Comedy, a journey through 3 realms of the afterlife. 9 concentric circles of descent, each punishing a different category of sin with increasing severity. 7 terraces of purgatory, each purging a different spiritual.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I should be extra tired because I got up early yesterday. I don't understand why I couldn't get to bed early.
But its influence on the Christian imagination has been incalculable. When most people in the Western world picture the afterlife, they are picturing something closer to Dante than to the Bible itself. The Bible's own descriptions of the afterlife are remarkably sparse. Jesus speaks of the kingdom of God, of many mansions in his Father's house, of outer darkness, and weeping and gnashing of teeth. But the detailed geography that most Christians carry in their minds comes from centuries of theological elaboration and artistic interpretation built upon these relatively brief passages. Islam is the world's second largest religion, with approximately 1.9 billion adherents. Its eschatology, its theology of the end times and the afterlife, is among the most detailed of any world religion, described in extensive passages in the Quran and elaborated further in the Hadith, the collected sayings and traditions of Prophet Muhammad. In Islamic teaching, the moment a person dies, the soul enters an intermediate state called the barzakh. This is not the final destination. It is a waiting room. In the grave, two angels named Munkar and Nakir visit the deceased and ask three questions. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? Who is this man who was sent among you? The righteous answer correctly and are shown a glimpse of paradise. The wicked cannot answer and are shown a glimpse of their punishment. The barzakh continues until the day of judgment, when all souls are resurrected and brought before God for final accounting. The imagery of that day is vivid. Every person's deeds are recorded in a book. The book is opened, and the deeds are weighed on a cosmic scale called the mizan. Good deeds on one side, sins on the other. The parallel to the Egyptian weighing of the heart is striking. A scale, a moral accounting. The weight of your life measured against a standard of divine justice. Different cultures, different centuries, different continents, same structure. After the weighing, the dead must cross as-sirat, a bridge over the fires of punishment. The bridge is described in the Hadith as thinner than a hair and sharper than a sword. The righteous cross it with ease, some at the speed of lightning. The wicked stumble and fall. The bridge is not a metaphor. In Islamic tradition, it is a real test, a physical crossing that separates the saved from the condemned. Paradise in Islam is called Jannah, and it is described with lavish sensory detail. Gardens beneath which rivers flow, rivers of water, of milk, of honey, and of wine that does not intoxicate. Fruits of every kind, garments of silk, reunion with loved ones, and the greatest reward of all, the beatific vision, seeing the face of God. The punishment of Jahannam is described with equal specificity. Fire, boiling water, chains, trees with fruit like the heads of demons. The suffering is proportionate to the sins committed. Among Islamic scholars, there is active debate or whether Muslim sinners serve a finite sentence before being admitted to paradise. The majority view holds that believers will eventually be released, while those who rejected faith entirely face permanent separation from God. Judaism, the oldest of the three Abrahamic faiths, takes a notably different approach, where Christianity and Islam provide elaborate maps of the afterlife. Judaism largely declines to draw one. The Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, contains remarkably few references to what happens after death. The word Sheol appears throughout the text, but it is not a place of punishment. It is a shadowy, indistinct realm, where the dead exist in a diminished state. The Psalms describe Sheol as a place of suffering, where the dead do not praise God. It is closer to the Greek asphodel meadows than to any concept of heaven or tradition. Later, Jewish thought, particularly in the rabbinic period, developed more detailed concepts. Olam haba, the world to come, is a future state of perfection that will be established after the coming of the Messiah. Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, is a paradise for the righteous. And Gehenna is a purgatorial state, but unlike the Christian concept of punishment, it is typically described as lasting no more than 12 months. It is a process of spiritual cleansing, not eternal torment. The resurrection of the dead is part of traditional Jewish belief. It appears in the 13 Principles of Faith, compiled by the medieval philosopher Maimonides, but the details are left deliberately vague. Judaism's emphasis is consistently on how to live, not on mapping the afterlife. There is a famous Talmudic attitude that captures this perfectly. We were given the Torah for this world. Let God take care of the next. Now step back and look at all three traditions together. Despite their theological differences, the structural similarities are remarkable. All three feature a moral judgment after All three include an intermediate state between death and the final reckoning. All three describe a weighing or evaluation of deeds. All three promise a paradise for the righteous and consequences for the wicked. All three affirm bodily resurrection in some form. And all three rest on the same Near Eastern cultural foundation that produced the Egyptian Ball of Mud thousands of years before any and the negative confessions.
This is Lovable, the AI app builder that turns ideas into reality. From small side projects to enterprise tools, from consumer apps to platforms that scale, built in minutes.
It's just right, like bundling your auto letters on a budget.
POV in your air duct, FYI, is disgusting.
We learn a little something over 150 years. Starting is hard, but on the other side of that fight is legacy. Fool's banquet. Start your legacy.
Get away from having to just get there. This is what travel can be. Retrain track. Amtrak.
The Last Judgment. The field of reeds and jarrah. The patterns rhyme across millennia. 4 billion people live their lives according to these. They shape their morality, their relationships, their hopes, and their fears around the conviction that death is not the end. That what you do in this life determines what happens in the next. That someone is watching. That the scales are real. Whether these beliefs are true descriptions of an actual afterlife or cultural elaborations of a universal neurological experience, they carry real weight in the real world. They comfort the dying. They restrain the living. They give meaning to suffering and hope to grief. And they have done so for thousands of years. But there is another way to approach the question of what happens after death. Not through religion, not through mythology, through the deepest and most unsettling question in all of science. A question that no laboratory has answered. A question that no equation has solved. A question so fundamental that it undermines everything we think we know about the relationship between the brain and the mind. What is consciousness? Where does it come from? And can it survive the destruction of the organ that appears to produce it? Chapter 10. The Hard Problem. In 1995, a philosopher named David Chalmers stood before a room full of scientists and asked a question that none of them could answer. He called it the hard problem of consciousness. And
What up, whoever's watching?
it remains unsolved. The question is simple. Why does the experience exist at all? We can map the brain to the individual neurons. We can track electrical signals across the cortex in real time. We can identify which regions activate when you see red, taste chocolate, hear music, or feel consciousness with extraordinary precision. But we cannot explain the one thing that matters most. Why is there something it is like to be you? When light hits your retina, photoreceptor cells convert it into electrical signals. Those signals travel through the optic nerve to the visual cortex, where they are processed through a hierarchy of neural circuits that extract edges, colors, motion, and depth. We can describe every step of